Chapter 1. The Caretaker. I spent 11 weeks alone on a property in rural Vermont the winter before last, house-sitting for a couple who were spending the winter abroad, a large old farmhouse on about 40 acres, nearest neighbor half a mile down a road that became impassable after heavy snow. I had done this kind of thing before. I like solitude, I like old houses, and I had work I could do remotely. It seemed like an ideal arrangement. The first 4 weeks were exactly that. Quiet, productive, the particular piece of a house that knows it's being cared for. I learned the sounds of the building, which pipes knocked in the cold, which windows let in drafts, the specific creak of the third stair from the bottom that I started to use as a kind of clock, telling me the house was settling the way it always had. In the 5th week, I found the journal. It was in a kitchen drawer, underneath some takeout menus, and an old phone book, a standard composition notebook, about 2/3 full. I opened it without thinking. I assumed it was a household log, notes about the property, that kind of thing. The first page was dated 3 winters ago. The handwriting was someone's I didn't recognize. It was a personal journal. I shouldn't have read it, and I did anyway. The way you sometimes do when you're alone for a long time and hungry for any evidence of other people's inner lives. The early entries were mundane, weather observations, things that needed fixing, the author's thoughts about the quiet and whether they were suited to it. The author was house-sitting, just like me. Different year, same arrangement. The entries became strange around the 6th week. The author started writing about sounds they heard at night, not the settling of the house which they had catalogued carefully, but something else. Footsteps on the porch at 2 a.m., the sound of the door handle being tried from the outside, the sensation, described carefully and without drama, of not being alone. The author had called the property owners. The owners had told them it was probably animals. Deer came close to the house in winter. Raccoons tried the doors sometimes. The author had noted this explanation in the journal and written underneath it, "I don't think it's animals." The final entry was dated 6 weeks into their stay. It said, "I found footprints in the snow this morning. They come from the tree line to the porch and back. They are not animal prints. I am going to stay inside today and see if they come back tonight." There was no entry after that. I called the property owners that evening and asked about the previous house-sitter. There was a pause. Then one of them said that the previous house-sitter had left early, midwinter, without much explanation, just a phone call saying they needed to go. They said they hadn't thought much of it. People sometimes found the isolation harder than expected. I went to bed that night and lay for a long time, listening to the third stair creak in the settling house. Then I heard something I hadn't heard before. Footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate, walking from one end to the other. I did not go to the window. I lay completely still until it stopped. Then I lay still for another hour after that. In the morning, I looked out the front door. The snow on the porch was undisturbed. The footstep sounds had been real enough that I'd been able to count them. There were no prints. I stayed for the remaining 5 weeks because I had committed to it and because leaving felt like the wrong kind of surrender. But I checked the snow every morning, and on 3 more nights I heard the porch, and every morning the snow was undisturbed. I don't know what walked on that porch. I don't know what happened to the previous house-sitter. I left a journal of my own in the kitchen drawer when I left, in case whoever came next wanted to know what to expect. Chapter 2. The Lighthouse. My uncle worked as a relief lighthouse keeper on a small island off the coast of Maine for several years in the 1990s, back when there were still manned lighthouses on that stretch of coast. He has told this story exactly once, to me at the end of a long evening, and he told it the way people tell things they've been carrying for a long time, carefully, making sure to get the details right. He was alone on the island for a standard 2-week rotation. The lighthouse itself was automated by that point. His job was maintenance and emergency response, not the light itself. He lived in the keeper's cottage, a small building attached to the base of the tower. The island was about 3 acres. There was a dock on the south side. Supply boat came every 2 weeks. On the 9th day of his rotation, he found a rowboat tied to the dock that hadn't been there the night before. It was an old wooden rowboat, well maintained, with no identifying markings. There were no oars in the boat. There was no name painted on the hull. He checked his log. No vessels had been reported in the area. No distress calls. No scheduled arrivals. The nearest inhabited island was 4 miles away. The mainland was 11 miles. He searched the island thoroughly. 3 acres. There weren't many places to search. He found nothing. No person, no camp, no evidence that anyone had come ashore. The rowboat was tied to his dock with a knot he didn't recognize. Not a standard maritime knot, something more complex, something that took him a few minutes to work out. He radioed the Coast Guard. They logged it and said they'd look into it. Nobody came. He spent the next 5 days aware in the way you become aware when you're alone on 3 acres, and something has arrived without explanation, that the island was different than it had been. He checked the rowboat every morning. It stayed. He checked the rest of the island every afternoon. Nothing. On the 14th day, the supply boat came. He told the crew about the rowboat. They were puzzled but not alarmed. Things washed up. Sometimes boats came loose from moorings. My uncle did 2 more rotations on that island before requesting a transfer. He never found out where the rowboat came from. He told me the thing that stayed with him wasn't the boat itself, it was the knot. The fact that someone had tied it, the fact that wherever they had gone afterward, they hadn't needed it to get back. Chapter 3. The Ranger Station. My cousin did a summer placement with the Forest Service in a national forest in Idaho, monitoring wildlife and maintaining a remote ranger station about 14 miles from the nearest road. She was there for 8 weeks with a partner, another placement student named Marcus, and they were fully supplied and in radio contact with the district office. It was hard work, but not unusual work, and for the first 6 weeks nothing happened that she would describe as strange. In the 7th week, Marcus started hearing things at night. She was a heavier sleeper than he was, and for the first few nights she slept through whatever he was hearing. He described it as voices, not close, not loud, but distinct enough that he was certain they were voices and not wind or animal sounds. He could never make out words, just the cadence of conversation, coming from the tree line about 100 yards from the station. She started setting an alarm for 2 a.m. to listen with him. The first 3 nights she heard nothing. On the 4th night she heard it too. It was exactly as Marcus had described, the unmistakable rhythm of people talking, coming from the darkness at the edge of the trees. Not one voice, multiple, the cadence of a group conversation, rising and falling the way conversations do. She could not make out words. She could not determine how many voices there were. They reported it to the district office. The district office said there should be no one in that area. The forest was closed to recreational use in that section due to an ongoing wildlife study. They said they'd send someone to check. Nobody came. The voices continued for the remaining 10 nights of their placement, always the same time, between 2 and 3 a.m., always from the same direction, always impossible to make out words. On their last night, my cousin did something she hadn't done before. She took her flashlight and walked toward the tree line while Marcus stayed at the station with the radio. She walked to where the voices seemed to be coming from. She could hear them clearly as she approached, clearer than she'd ever heard them from the station. Still no words, but close enough now that she was certain these were human voices having a human conversation. She reached the tree line. The voices stopped. She stood at the edge of the trees for a long time, listening to the silence. Then she walked back to the station. She and Marcus broke camp at first light the next morning 2 days ahead of schedule. She told me she's thought about it often, about what she would have found if she'd gone into the trees instead of stopping at the edge. She told me she thinks she made the right decision. She told me she's not entirely sure,